Hello, everybody, and welcome back to It's a Wonderful Podcast. We've been away for a while, but don't worry, Morgan is not to blame for this. You can just blame me like I blame myself for everything that goes wrong in my life. But today, today we've got a really fun adventure for you. But I want to first check in with my Sheriff of Manchester. How you doing, Morgan?
Hey, I'm okay. It has been a while. Even this episode, which was actually originally supposed to go out a week late, is now also a day later than that. So we do profusely apologise about this and hope at least it's back to some sort of normality soon. Some things you just can't help happening sometimes, and there's nothing we can do about that. But we're back, and we're talking about a hell of an entertaining film.
Indeed. I have to apologise, but I should divulge the reason that we're a day late. It's because Thanos snapped his fingers and my microphone disappeared into existence, so I had to find a way to get that back. Although Doctor Strange now owes me a coffee, which is weird.
wasn't the best time for anyone, really. I've heard it referred to as the snappening. Can we talk about that for a minute, please? Because that is absolutely genius. And it put like punning on the end of anything, and it just seems to work. I like it. But that
the queening for that Bohemian Rhapsody trailer.
Okay, it doesn't work there. It doesn't work there. For that. It only works with words with a P at the end. Like snap. Or hap.
Or if you're in London, the brap.
That was... Oh God. Right, anyway, that was a nice start. Nolan, what the hell are we actually talking about?
Well, as we know, I hate it when stories get misrepresented in movies, and that trailer for Robin Hood with Taron Egerton came out 2 weeks ago. I hated it. I'm sure Taron Egerton's going to be fine, but I wanted to revisit the true Robin Hood adaptation.
The one with the fox?
No! Not the one with the bloody fox.
The one with the fox and the lion and the wolf and the snake.
I don't know what you're talking about. That doesn't
And the other fox and the chicken and the bear and the mole. And
do you hear how ridiculous you sound?
What else is there? There's many, many animals in Disney's Robin Hood.
You sound like George Orwell talking about your animals.
I sound like George Orwell. That might be the biggest compliment you've paid to me in the history of this friendship. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Christ, we've already gotten silly now. And
we have.
You know what? I'm just going to get the Shrek references out of the way. Errol Flynn's Robin Hood wears green and layers. Shrek is green and has layers. There you go. There's your fan service.
Okay, so yes, we are talking about The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, with Erroll Flynn as Robin Hood. I was going to bring up the Shrek reference purely for the fact that Robin Hood is in Shrek.
But go ahead with that.
But for some reason, is French.
Yeah, that was always weird to me. Robin Hood is an English character.
Robin Hood in Shrek is French and a complete womanizer.
Well, he is a womanizer in all those versions of the story, but he's not French.
Why is Robin Hood a villain in Shrek? Because he essentially is. He's certainly not a heroic character. It's weird. Maybe it's just another one of Shrek's subversions of classic legends. Maybe it's just that. I think it is that. I'd like to think it is that. Anyway, Errol Flynn, you picked it. Why did you pick it?
Well, I sort of grew up loving adventure stories. Like, everyone talks about wanting to go to the movies to escape, and when you watch something like an Errol Flynn adventure movie and a nice little swashbuckler, it's pure just stick it on, pour yourself a cup of tea and just lose yourself for an hour and 40 minutes. Yeah. And Errol Flynn's just so charming and so cool in his role of Robin Hood
Yeah.
that I can always find myself rewatching this from time to time. I know it pretty well, and it's just how that sort of you see those characters when you grow up that you wish you could be like.
Yeah.
Errol Flynn as Robin Hood is one of those characters for me.
That's cool. I mean, I agree with you when you say that this version of Robin Hood is very cool and very charismatic. And like I said in the last episode, this was my first time seeing the adventures of Robin Hood. Errol Flynn pulls off the very tight green outfit surprisingly well.
He does look like a grown-up Peter Pan, though.
Yes, he does, but it doesn't actually come off as campy at all.
Which is surprising for an adventure movie from the 30s.
I mean, I never mind camp in films anyway. It just sort of it adds to the pleasure of it for me.
Is that why you like Friday the 13th?
Is Friday the 13th campy? I don't think
no, but it's got Camp Crystal Lake in it.
Yes, but that's not what I was talking about, is it? I was talking about campy as campy, not campy as in camping. I was be talking about random tent films all day, and that's just no fun for anyone.
The silliness is getting way too early now, and that just shows you what kind of movie this is.
Whether it shows you what kind of movie this is, or it just shows you that we like being silly whilst also talking about wonderful old films. I think that's a better description of why we get silly. Errol Flynn though is seriously, it made me want to go and watch more Errol Flynn films where he's like the pirate films that he was in, the true swashbucklers, because I say this as well, the sword fights, he's a good swordsman, Errol Flynn. He could kill you if he wanted to with a sword.
You gotta think, it was all practical back then. Like, that was actually two actors fighting with swords, having to do it somewhat safely and also make it look convincing enough, and he just pulls it off so well.
He does. He's
honestly,
he's very
the
quick.
Quintessential adventure star.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair statement.
I dare say he probably went on to inspire characters like Indiana Jones and like Han Solo,
certainly.
Those kind of characters. Probably Jack Sparrow as well.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, when you look at older adventure films like this, it's easy to see why so many adventure films throughout the history of film have been viewed, as being very similar to those that have come before, whether it's in story or just sort of performance. Like, there's always a little bit of a romantic interest, there's a bit of fights, and there's the lead is always charismatic and, going so far back to early adventure films like this one. Errol Flynn did it first, and that's why we love going back to films like this to see where, the charisma that people like Indiana Jones or Jack Sparrow pulled off. They've watched people like Errol Flynn to get that characterization, and I always love doing that. That's why I do this show.
I reckon you could pull off a pretty decent Errol Flynn Robin Hood cosplay.
I'd have to trim my facial hair significantly.
You could just do like bearded Robin Hood.
There's a lot of nice facial hair in the Adventures of Robin Hood.
Oh,
actually.
yes,
there's a lot of nice facial hair. Let's get this. I want to get this away with early, actually. I'm inducting 2 new people into the Moustache Hall of Fame. Errol Flynn and Basil Rathbone. No one else. Claude Rains' weird beard just didn't look right. It looked false. Claude Rains plays Prince John in this film. Basil Rathbone plays a guy of Gisborne, who is not in the Disney version.
I knew I recognised that actor.
Yes, Basil Rathbone.
I didn't realise it was Basil Rathbone until now.
It's Basil Rathbone with facial hair.
See, I know Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes. Like, oh man, that just makes this movie cooler.
Yeah, obviously.
I assume that my Freddie Mercury stash is not making it into the Mustache Hall of Fame.
Look, you try and pull off the mustache of Freddie Mercury all you want. I really, really wish this was a video podcast, so you could all see Nolan's attempt at a Freddie Mercury mustache. You are not going in the Mustache Hall of Fame. The Mustache Hall of Fame is exclusively for people with facial hair in films before 1970 that I particularly enjoy. You are neither of those things. So, like I said, a lot of facial hair in The Adventures of Robin Hood, but Errol Flynn's perfectly thin, groomed moustache and beard, and Basil Rathbone's little curly thing go into the Mustache Hall of Fame alongside everyone else who's currently in there, who I kind of forget who's in there now. I really should make an official list of that. But they are going in anyway. What is the thing you love most about The Adventures of Robin Hood?
I like how Errol Flynn as Robin Hood can be charismatic, cool, and a really great sword fighter without being a dick about it. Because you see that so many times with adventure heroes that everyone kind of likes when they're all cocky and like arrogant and everything. And I satirize that in my own book, Moonflower, which you might be able to purchase soon, by the way. But
that was shameless. That was absolutely shameless. Oh, everybody's just groaned.
But I like that Errol Flynn can do it without coming off as a prat. Like, if you get what I mean.
A prat. A prat.
We got to use the British
What a fantastic
insults.
word, a prat. You'd be calling him a plonker next and things like that. I don't know.
Oh, no, there's someone else in this I can call a plonker, but we'll get to him soon. Do
you know what? I did want to bring this up, and this is a weird episode already, but I did want to bring this up. I love the fact that it has little sort of title cards with text on. Every so often.
That's just classic adventure storytelling.
It's just like, right, Robin Hood and this happens, and then you see it for about 20 minutes, and then it comes another one. 3 days have passed, but it's all in that lovely sort of medieval font, because it's obviously Robin Hood is a English medieval legendary figure. Didn't actually exist for any of those people that actually thought he existed. It's like King Arthur. King Arthur never existed. He's just basically a British, or an English more specifically, an English legend. Yeah, but I love those little text cards. It made me really feel like it was a proper just fun watch. A really old feeling adventure story.
And I feel like that's also kind of tributing to the silent era, because there was a lot of silent Robin Hood films before this came out. So I think that's kind of like honouring that kind of style of film. So we've got a movie from the 30s here giving praise in its own execution to films that came before. And that's the kind of movie I love talking about on this show.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're only 11 years after the invention of the talking picture, so stylistically you can understand why these sort of title cards would have been in there as just sort of, we remember seeing that Robin Hood picture 15 years ago. That's nice. It's doing the same sort of thing, but we can hear Robin Hood speak now rather than just say it. Couple of great quotes, actually. Just one great quote that I did want to bring up is, I think, early on in the film, Marian, who is played by Olivia de Havilland, by the way, who is still alive at nearly 102 years old, and applause for Olivia de Havilland, because she's great. She asks Robin early on, Like, you speak treason, and he says, fluently.
He just owns it.
That is a great quote. That is a great quote. Norman and Saxon. Norman versus Saxon things as well.
That was interesting for me for this adaptation specifically, because I've never really known that to be part of the Robin Hood story.
Well, it makes sense considering the characters involved. I've just never sort of thought about it as a rich Norman and poor Saxon type deal. I've just thought it as, rich royalty and poor commoners. But, Prince John, who is sat there, who is
the worst.
Prince John, of course, brother of King Richard I, Richard the Lionheart, who has been off fighting in the Crusades and has been kidnapped, I think, and held to ransom. Prince John is his brother who likes taxis and generally being a bit of a fool. The lion in Disney's Robin Hood. Although not as see, I'm going to use the word cartoonish, and I don't mean the fact that he's drawn. I mean the fact that he's over the top in the Disney version, and in this version. He is. But in this version, he's sort of subtle about his despicableness. He's not crying for his mother like Lion Prince John is.
God for that.
But he is played by Claude Rains, who we know from The Invisible Man, even though we don't see him. Funny. And we also know from Casablanca, Claude Rains and director of Casablanca, Michael Curtiz, who also directs The Adventures of Robin Hood. Claude Rains and Michael Curtiz, little partnership, little director-actor partnership there. I've realised I've been talking for the last 4 hours. And for some reason don't let anybody else speak. I wish you were here in this room just so you could hit me and tell me to not speak. Please go and speak.
I'm not a violent person, so I wouldn't do that anyway. But no, the thing with Claude Rains, him as Prince John, is that he can be despicable and cartoonish without becoming a cartoon. Like, his style of villainy, I don't know, it reminds me a lot of Joaquin Phoenix in Gladiator. Like, that sort of...
I like that.
Villain that you just love to hate. And I wouldn't be surprised if Joaquin Phoenix bases a lot of his acting off of Claude Rains and, like, those kind of villain character actors. And the other thing that I love in this... if you know the story of Robin Hood, you know that when he's being an outlaw, that there's a moment in the movie where they do an archery contest, and he enters it because he wants to see Maid Marian, but he also wants to show off a little bit.
Yeah.
So you can tell, that's a thing I love about the Robin Hood character, is that he sort of, he does this thing because he feels like he owes it to the people, but he really enjoys the idea of being a legendary outlaw as well, and I find that so fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. It is very fun to watch as well. It's probably why the Robin Hood legend has stuck around for as long as it has, not just in a sort of political sense, steal from the rich, give to the poor, but also with the fact that it is just sort of a feel-good story for everybody, whether it's, told in spoken word or as a cartoon or as a fully fledged live action film. I
don't want to see a full-on modern version of Robin Hood where he has like a Vine account and he's just bragging about stealing from the rich Twitter celebrities.
Oh, someone is definitely writing that somewhere. Someone is absolutely writing a modern... Mind you always hear the term, he's a modern-day Robin Hood. No, I don't like that term.
I'd be curious to see what an actual modern version of the Robin Hood story would be like. I'm
But,
not
I
sure
mean,
it probably wouldn't be as good, but
It wouldn't-
I'd be interested to see where they take it. If they can pull it off with Macbeth, then I reckon they could do something interesting with it.
They can't. I'm sorry. They can't pull it off with Macbeth.
Did you not see that thing the BBC did with McAvoy as Macbeth? They did
I
it really well.
Don't like modern retellings of Shakespeare or legends. I think they should be in the time that they were made.
And I also don't like versions of legends where they turn all the characters into animals for
But
some reason.
the legend is then accessible for the younger people.
Younger people can watch this one. It's not like violent or anything. Well, it's got violence, but it's not like gratuitous.
No, that's true. Disney. That's all it is. The name means everything.
And I know you're itching to compare this to the animated Robin Hood, so I'll let you go ahead and talk about why you love that.
No. I'm not going to go ahead and talk about that because we're not talking about this. We're talking about the Adventures of Robin Hood from 1938. I did find out that it won 3 Oscars.
Deservedly so.
Score, because it has got a great score, and you don't even notice the score until you actually think about what you're listening to and realise that your heart is just going bang, 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 and it's the score that's just really grandiose and big
epic
and fast-paced, and it's quite a fast-paced film, actually. Like,
and it's not pretentious about it either. It's just, it knows what it is. It's a swashbuckling adventure with a charismatic hero.
Absolutely. I mean, in some sort of older adventure films that I've watched, they can be quite sort of slow because they tend to be a bit more on the what you'd consider as the genre of epic. So it's always like 4.5 hours long, and it really gets into Charlton Heston or Yul Brynner or someone.
That's partly why I don't like the recent versions of Robin Hood that have come out, because they try to turn it into some kind of epic, and if you turn Robin Hood into this big epic character, I think you lose a lot of the appeal of what makes him likable and like interesting. Is that he's not like an epic legend or a superhero or a masked guy who is like a secret vigilante or whatever. He's just like a small town hero from Nottingham. And that's literally all you need. If we're gonna do the inevitable superhero comparisons, he should be more like Spider-Man, less like Captain America.
Yeah, definitely. He's a hero of the people, not of. He's not interested
The
in.
world.
Well, he wouldn't be able to save the world anyway, so that's sort of like a null statement.
But he does have some fun making fun of Prince John, which we all like
Prince
to do.
John is a very easy person to make fun of, to be quite frank, because he's snivelly and slithery, and he is a snake.
And Claude Rains nails it.
Claude Rains does nail it. You can't say fairer than that. Although I love the little trio of Prince John, Guy of Gisborne, and the Sheriff of Nottingham. The Sheriff of Nottingham, by the way, is absolutely useless in this film.
He's not really in this a lot, and a lot of people associate the Sheriff of Nottingham with being Robin Hood's arch enemy.
Well, yeah, but that's because people have only seen Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Yeah, and they just think of Alan Rickman.
Or they've seen the Disney version where the sheriff, it's the sheriff and it's Prince John.
Well, he's pretty useless there as well.
He is, but he's at least a bit of a major character because they completely get rid of Guy of Gisborne, who is basically, he's the sort of most prevalent villain in this.
He's like an evil counterpart to Robin Hood, I've always thought.
Yeah, and that is Basil Rathbone, who, as we learn,
is Sherlock Holmes, and he's great in this too.
I mean, you do like to say that Basil Rathbone is the one true Sherlock Holmes, and there will never be any more else. But
yep.
I'm a Cushing guy. Everybody knows I'm a Peter Cushing guy when it comes to literally anything Peter Cushing's in.
As long as you don't say Robert Downey Jr., then you're fine.
People like those movies.
I don't. That is not Sherlock Holmes.
People like those movies. People, you know, you go Cumberbatch, Sherlock Holmes, you go Cumberbatch, Sherlock Holmes. Although that is another weird one, because it's modern retelling, and no. So...
I mean, I like Sherlock for what it is, but if I want to watch a Sherlock Holmes story, it'll be Rathbone.
Cushing.
Peter, you know what? I'll give Cushing another shot sometime down the future for you. But
please give Peter Cushing another shot.
I know how much you love posters.
Oh, that's
the Adventures of Robin Hood poster is pure art.
I feel like I say this literally every episode. They don't make posters like they used to. Why do they not make posters like they used to? Because people just want garbage.
Even that the poster for this movie looks kind of like an ancient scroll, like with the color scheme.
People used to think about posters. I suppose that was the only way to sell a movie.
Oh yeah, you didn't have the teasers for teasers, or the
teaser. The teaser for teaser of The Adventures of Robin Hood would simply be a shot of Robin Wright and Will Scarlet as well. Will Scarlet, who, by the way, is wearing the most boldly red costume I think I've ever seen in the history of the colour red.
But there is I might have gotten confused in this because I haven't seen it for a while, but is Will Scarlet the guy who gets shot on the ladder? Because he was also wearing a very red costume.
You basically, sort of like the first half or so of this, you see Robin... sort of, I don't know, enlist the likes of Little John and Friar Tuck and people we know from Robin Hood. But Will Scarlet's already with him at this point. I love the little sort of fight he has with Little John on that bridge over the river.
It's fantastic. Where
they're just using, like, tree branches just to try and hit each other in, and then just end up laughing about it because they've both fallen in. And they say, "Yay!"
And this version of Little John is not a basically rehash of Baloo from the Jungle Book.
That's unfair, just because Little John from Disney Robin Hood was voiced by the same guy as Baloo from the Jungle Book doesn't mean...
He's basically the same character.
Well, it's a good job they got the same actor then, isn't it? Because it makes sense. Stop hating on Disney's Robin Hood. Okay? Just please. Anyway... I like Friar Tuck in this, actually, you know, because he's a bit of a badass, and you never.
Yeah, you always think of Friar Tuck as being like this frail old man that needs saving, but this one's just like, no, he can be as badass as Robin and the Merry Men.
I've never even thought about Friar Tuck as having any sort of competent fighting skills, but he has. It's weird. I like it. Well done. Anyway,
good job on Friar Tuck.
I was talking about the Sheriff of Nottingham anyway, wasn't I? And the fact that he's useless.
He's a non-character in this movie.
He's such a coward. There's a good 4 times throughout this film where there is a shot of the Sheriff of Nottingham, and there's like a battle. Robin has infiltrated some sort of location again, and the sheriff and like Prince John is like, seize him, and Guy of Gisborne, Basil Rathbone, he's out straight away. Everybody else is out straight away. And then there's just a shot of the Sheriff of Nottingham who's just sort of thinking about unsheathing his sword, but then just doesn't and turns his back. Why is the Sheriff of Nottingham such a coward? It made me laugh so hard.
I think that's just taking the piss out of, like, the police force, maybe.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe that was the original sort of characterization of the Sheriff of Nottingham.
Possibly, yeah. I don't even know. Robin Hood does come from folklore, so I don't know how accurate it is, but I could see that being an inspiration for it.
I really don't know. Anyway, should we talk about the romance?
Yes, and as a kid watching it, you're sort of like, okay, I get it. Robin likes Marian. Can we please get back to the sword fighting? But looking at it now, they have such great chemistry together. They're a really cute couple. and I buy it. I buy it way more than I did as a kid.
Yeah, I like the fact that I feel like we often say this as well. People fall in love really quickly in old films, but
Yeah, there's a lot of insta love.
There's a bit of that. There's a bit of that, but in terms of Marian, it's weird because I've only ever really gone off what I'm reading up on history and the Disney version. And the Disney version, Marian is sort of like a previous lover of Robin. They already know each other, but they've not seen each other in years. So when she comes back to Nottingham, and that's where the romance comes from there. But in this, Marian's like, she reminded me of someone you'd see on Game of Thrones.
That's
because
accurate.
She's like, Prince John's always like, yes, why don't you marry Sir Guy of Gisborne? He's in love with you. And she's just sort of like, well, no, I don't really want to do that.
Because Prince John's kind of a dickhead.
I feel like there's weirdly in the court of Prince John.
I reckon Prince John is that guy who acts like he's this sort of God's gift to the world, but behind closed doors he'd probably need to use like Viagra or something.
Well, I don't think there's any need to be so vulgar about it.
But
there's children listening.
You know what I mean? He's that kind of character.
No, I do know what you mean. He is very much that kind of character. But, I was really impressed with Marian in this. Just another reason to love Olivia de Havilland.
And I don't mind the Marian.
She's her own little badass.
I don't mind Marian in the animated Robin Hood as much. She's a very different take on it. She's much more like a maternal kind of Marian, whereas this version of Marian is more of I don't want to be ordered around by this snivelly little Prince John. I want to make my own decisions, and I like Robin Hood, so I want to be with him.
Yeah, and ultimately where her change of heart comes, because at the start she's very like, pro-Norman, pro-Prince John and everything like that, but obviously sometime in the film later, a convoy that Guy of Gisborne and Marian and the Sheriff of Nottingham actually is captured by the Merry Men, and Robin takes Marian to where he's sort of holding all the people whose houses have burnt down, and they've got like one ear and one eye, and they're missing just everything. They're completely homeless. They've been ruined by the Norman knights and the taxes and everything like that. And he takes her to sort of see these people, and she has a real change of heart after seeing what her people have done to the community, and that is a nice way of sort of forcing a change of heart, or not forcing a change of heart, but giving a change of heart to Marian, as opposed to something like the Disney version where it's just like, oh Robin, I remember you from years ago, please love me again.
See, she's an actual character in this movie and not just the bland love interest.
Yeah, definitely. Which is nice to see. It's nice to see.
Although that bland love interest might just be a Disney thing from that era. Well,
I mean, Disney are prime on bland love interests, really, aren't they? That's what they do.
Most of the time, they're getting better at it now.
Yeah, I mean, they don't make bland. They don't tend to make stuff as bland anymore. But certainly a while.
Funny
ago,
enough,
go for it.
One of their best love interests that Disney have done, Flynn Rider, was based off Robin Hood.
Yeah, see, I haven't watched the Tangled film.
Dude, it's so good.
Yeah, but I'm not going to watch Tangled, am I? Let's be fair.
Guys, get Morgan to watch Tangled, please. If he won't read Percy Jackson, he should at least watch Tangled.
No.
Not for this show, but just in general.
No, I'm not watching Tangled. Even a little bit.
You are missing out, sir.
I exclusively watch Disney films from before the quote-unquote Renaissance period of Disney.
Yes, his favourite one is Song of the South.
That's just... There's no need for that, really, is there? There's no need to be bringing up... You can't go around saying that on publishable material. Man. You can't. It's... No. I'm hurt. I'm very hurt.
That's okay.
Speaking of racism... very progressive in some ways is The Adventures of Robin Hood, in the sense that it's very sort of, oh, I don't care who you are, you know, you live in England, I will protect you from these crooked people in charge.
And that's refreshing to see in such an old movie.
Yeah, definitely. There's literally, you know, there's a quote from Robin. He says, like, something along the lines of, Norman, Saxon, I don't care. I'm just here to help those in need. Anyone, regardless of who they are. It's nice.
And that's what makes him such a great hero.
Yeah. Anyone. He's not. He doesn't pick who he helps. He just helps whoever is in need. Robin Hood feared... I'm going to start singing the goddamn little weird song in a minute.
Go for it, please do.
No, I won't, because
I'm just going to light this up and wait for you to start singing.
You can do whatever you want. I'm not going to sing, because I know if I start singing the Robin Hood song, I'll turn it into a song about Ryan Giggs, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that, because not only do some people listening to this have no idea who Ryan Giggs even is, which is a shame.
I know who he is. He's a football player.
I know you know who he is, but, you know, we've got to be reasonable here.
We're talking about the real version of football for any of our American listeners.
And, yes, there is a song that United fans sing about Ryan Giggs that is to the tune of the Robin Hood riding through the Glen song.
I think I know what you're going down for there, man.
And it's great. What on earth was I talking about before I started talking about Ryan Giggs? In fact, I'm not going to talk anymore because I've done it again. Oh God, I'm so ashamed.
Don't be ashamed. If just because you're feeling that way, I'll bring up what is arguably the most coolest part of this movie. The final fight between Robin Hood and Guy of Gisborne is freaking epic.
Yeah, it is. It lasts for ages as well.
And it's just, I don't know, there's something about where it's set that just gets me so excited, because it's like, they filmed this on an actual set. It actually looks like a castle. It's choreographed in a way that I may be overthinking this, but like each movement feels like something that the character would do. You know, Guy of Gisborne is like being very defensive, very aggressive. Robin is being more of the defensive kind of attack, but he's also being a little bit
he's got a flair to
show-offy
him.
About it.
He's got flair.
It's
to
really
him.
fun.
Guy of Gisborne's the rigid, strategic fighter. Robin is the flair type, flamboyant fighter, who obviously wins. I mean, no Robin Hood film's gonna end with Robin losing.
I believe he does die in some of the original stories, and that's the final scene.
Where's this at? Robin Hood dying?
I remember there's a version of Robin Hood which ends with him dying, and he tells his merry men to bury him where his last arrow shoots.
Is this the Brothers Grimm version of Robin?
I don't know, but I can remember hearing it from something.
That sounds very sort of old fairy tale. That's like Little Red Riding Hood, and they all were eaten by the wolf and died miserably. The end.
I mean, Robin Hood still won in the story, but he was dying, and because that was kind of a whole point of Robin Hood, is that he wasn't this invincible guy. He did have a vulnerability to him, and he wanted to be remembered by his arrows, which are his most treasured possession, let's be honest.
Okay.
And so he was buried wherever his last arrow was shot.
Okay, I actually kind of like that now. Speaking of arrows, actually, I found this out. Whenever you see someone get shot with an arrow in the chest, they're actually getting shot with an arrow. They're just wearing a hell of a load of padding.
Yep. Nice good old practical
That's madness. That is madness. Like, any of those arrows hit you in the face, you are deceased.
They had balls back then. None of these CGI arrows like we saw in the Taron Egerton Robin Hood.
They knew how to make a goddamn film. They knew how to just make a fun film. Have I even mentioned that it is in glorious, glorious Technicolor?
I mean, it's even from a cinematography point of view, it's just so colourful.
I say this a lot as well. Technicolor, no film ever looks better than when it's in Technicolor.
Yep. It's a nice little counterbalance to the other Robin Hood films, which feel the need to make the colour palette all gloomy and depressing.
Oh god, yeah. I haven't seen this horrendous trailer for Taron Egerton Robin Hood, which was the reason that you wanted to even talk about this film in the first place.
I'm sure Taron Egerton will play Robin Hood pretty well. That movie just looks like garbage.
But, they go all out with the Technicolor as well. They take advantage of what they've got with Technicolor in this film. Everything is so colourful. And for a film that's, mainly set in a forest, the costume, and it is true movie magic, to use.
Will Scarlet is very Scarlet.
He's definitely very, very Scarlet. Like I say, he's the most... I'm literally baffled by just how red can red be. What a weird
Prince John's
statement.
like wearing his bling and everything.
Prince John would wear a load of bling, jewels, we should say, bling. He's not wearing a gold chain with a dollar sign on it.
Oh god, if there was a modernized Robin Hood, he'd basically be Ali G.
Oh dear. Oh no. But yeah, Guy of Gisborne wears a load of... And the weird bishop fella. Who's he?
I don't exactly remember if he's in the original story, but...
Who is the bishop guy? I don't know who the bishop guy is.
To be honest...
He wasn't in the Disney one.
He's not. But I think he's just there to be a bishop, basically.
The Merry Men use the bishop, don't they? Because at the end of the film, Prince John is basically has declared himself king because Richard the Lionheart has not returned home yet. Unbeknownst to him, Richard the Lionheart has returned home and will be attending the coronation. We don't see what they do to him, or how they bribe him, or how they convince him. But he calls Prince John out, and he's been working with Prince John throughout the entire film. He calls Prince John out, and Prince John's saying, "Don't be ridiculous, I'm the king by blood right. Richard is not here." And then Richard just goes, "Aha, I am here." And then it all just... It doesn't go well for Claude Rains, but...
No, not really. And Guy of Gisborne gets a nice little defeat as well, although...
He does.
When he was fighting him on the candles, I was expecting Robin Hood to do something with that, like, I don't know, maybe put his blade on it and then put it in his face or something, but I don't know, maybe that's just that. Maybe that says more about me as a writer than anything else.
Maybe. Speaking of that fight, I really loved the shot where you could just see the shadows fighting.
I would have that framed on my wall if I could.
On the big sort of circular wall in the middle of a castle room. Beautifully shot. Really, all is. It all is really, really well shot. What was another thing I wanted to bring up? I did want to bring up. I don't know. Look. You know Marian's Handmaiden?
Yes.
Played by my equal parts my favourite and absolute least favourite person who I've ever seen in a film ever. The actress's name is Una O'Connor. Every time because I love watching Bride of Frankenstein, but then she turns up and starts screaming and hooting and shouting. And when I saw her name in the opening credits, I just thought, oh, Jesus Christ, we're not in for this again, surely. But no, she did not shriek or shout or scream or wail or any other horrendous noise that she makes in Bride of Frankenstein. She's just an ally of Maid Marian. And I like the fact that one of the merry men is just like, I'm going to go off with you. Where did that come from? What a weird story point. That this guy's just like, oh, I've never had a sweetheart in all my life. And she stood next, well, you've never had a sweetheart. Because she does talk like that, because it's absolutely just the worst voice.
It's like visiting your nan, and your nan's too happy.
It's not like visiting my nan, because my nan is a delightful woman. I'm sure Una O'Connor was a delightful woman. I just can't get over the sound of her voice. Oh, God. But that was a weird story point when them two just decided, oh yeah, we're going to hook up. What has happened there? Weirdness.
It is, but to be honest, I was probably too focused on Robin and Marian to be paying attention to that.
Look, I'm sure anyone who doesn't focus on Una O'Connor as an actress as much as I do wouldn't have even noticed that. But it has stuck with me. Unless there's anybody else out there who knows her as the incredibly shrill woman from Bride of Frankenstein, in which case, please tell me that you know her as that, so we can have mutual conversations about Una O'Connor.
Probably Billy.
I like that. I don't know if he'd recognise it, though. Would he recognise her as the shrill woman from Bride of Frankenstein? Or would he just watch Bride of Frankenstein and, recognise all the good things about it, rather than the really aggravating thing?
I mean, now that we're talking about our friends, obviously we have to cast Raul as Friar Tuck.
Do you know what? I'm not going to cast Raul as Friar Tuck.
He's the oldest cast member. That fits Raul.
I'm going to cast Raul as the Sheriff of Nottingham. Oh my God, we are horrible.
Oh. Now I'm just imagining the animated Robin Hood Sheriff of Nottingham, but it's Raul.
Oh.
God, what have we done?
It's not funny. Why? You were the one that brings this up, and I'm always the one that comes off the worst.
I just said Friar Tuck, because that role fits Raul.
Well, exactly. Of course it fits him.
Because he just turned 99 last week.
He did, actually. Happy birthday, Raul.
Yeah, one more year and you get a letter from the Queen.
Raul was 35 when The Adventures of Robin Hood was released.
That's true.
So,
he probably auditioned for Robin Hood as well.
We have to pay our homage to our most loved friend. Even though it would appear that we absolutely hate him, we don't.
We absolutely adore him.
We do.
Like, now there's a tradition in every one of these episodes. Shrek gets brought up and Raul gets brought up.
I don't know why Raul gets. There are people listening to this who don't know who Raul is.
Well, if you don't, you should know who he is. He runs the Monday show with our friend Troy Loxton, and he's a very delightful guy when he's not going on about Pretty Little Liars.
Or Supernatural. Or any of the various spin-offs that may or may not be.
Oh, man. But anyway, back to this. I'm going to assume that not a lot of people have seen this movie. So, since this was your first time watching it, let's just say we go back into the Twitter chat, OSP Think Tank, which is where we all hang out, and we want to convince them all to watch The Adventures of Robin Hood. What would you say to them?
Convince people to watch The Adventures of Robin Hood, I would say, you know The Wizard of Oz? Do you like how it looks? Obviously, the answer would be yes, I do like how The Wizard of Oz looks. I would then say, Robin Hood, right? Yeah, it's all, yeah, we know Robin Hood, yeah. Mix the two.
That makes a whole lot of sense.
Add in there someone as perfectly cast as Erroll Flynn, and, the likes of Claude Rains and Basil Rathbone, and Olivia de Havilland rounding out the cast. You can see why it won 3 Oscars, and you can see why it's such a revered film still, and I can say this now, hell of a lot better than the Disney version, even though I do like the Disney version a lot. It's just a hell of a lot of a better film, and a more entertaining film, in truth.
And it also does not have an out-of-place, nowhere Bryan Adams song that makes no bloody sense.
Well, that was Prince of Thieves.
Yes,
but it's a lot better than Prince of Thieves.
Have modern music.
Prince of Thieves is a weird film.
Having Bryan Adams music playing in a period piece is just weird.
If we're going to bring up Prince of Thieves, I feel like we need to talk about the thing that everybody always talks about with Prince of Thieves, is that Kevin Costner cannot do an English accent.
Oh, no, he cannot. But Errol Flynn can pull it off pretty well.
Errol Flynn can pull it off for an Australian.
No, they should have just got Mel Gibson to play in Prince of Thieves. No, they shouldn't. That's a terrible idea.
Do you know what? Early 90s Mel Gibson could have done that. Not now Mel Gibson. Not Mel Gibson now that we know he's a horrible human.
Now Mel Gibson would be like, not even Prince John. I don't know, he'd just be like some racist old guy that maybe gets hit by an arrow at some point.
Probs. But I could have seen, actually, early 90s Mel Gibson doing a much better job than Costner.
I'll give you that, even though I'm not a big fan of his portrayal of William Wallace.
Well, you would know, being Scottish, we should go to the Scotsman for thoughts on Braveheart.
I mean, like, when Braveheart was coming out, everyone was like, oh, Mel Gibson, an Australian guy playing a Scottish guy, that's not going to be very convincing. And look at him now, an alcoholic racist.
Couldn't be more Scottish, could he? Couldn't be more Scottish if he wanted to be.
God, now this show has got me stealing old Frankie Boyle jokes.
Oh, you can't steal jokes. Oh, is that what you've just done? Oh, he's stolen a joke.
That's from Frankie Boyle.
Everybody shame him on Twitter, at NolanDean27. Shame him. Shame him for stealing jokes off other people that are far more successful comedians. Oh, dear.
Anyways, I'm very curious to follow up with this. What have you got for next week, if you've picked something?
Does that suggest that you are done talking about The Adventures of Robin Hood?
There's really not much more I can say other than that it's a great adventure movie. No. It's really fun. Errol Flynn is perfectly cast, and if you're a film historian and you want to see where kind of the adventure movie sort of started, I'd recommend this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's the story of Robin Hood. Everybody knows the story of Robin Hood, even if they've never actually watched any Robin Hood films. It's not necessarily the deepest film you'll ever see, but it's got a really nice sort of different take on it, where it's very sort of it feels quite, political in a very nice way, which
it's
is
subtle
something.
In that.
Yeah, is something that other Robin Hood films and the Disney version and whatever else don't necessarily go into a lot.
Or the Ridley Scott one where they turned him into Batman for some reason.
Oh dear. But it does that, but it doesn't sort of dwell on it, and it doesn't bog you down with it because it is 100% all the way through just a hell of a fun film to watch and really entertaining. Erroll Flynn is perfect. Speaking of what I have got for next, speaking of perfect, no. Do you know what? Segues don't work. We're not very good at them on It's a Wonderful.
We need to get Roth Cornet in here to segue properly.
We're not very good at segues on It's a Wonderful podcast. Roth.
Roth is probably not listening to this, true. But if she is, on the off chance, maybe you can help us with the segues.
Can we hire you for segue duty? We'll pay you. We can't really pay you. Do you know what? Doesn't matter.
We'll pay you with British accents.
We'll just learn off you. Roth, because that's the best thing to do. What I have picked for next week, I actually didn't pick anything until the day of this recording, because I noticed something's recently been added to Netflix. Hi guys, really sorry for this very, very awkward transition, but as well as the unnecessarily lengthy delays on this episode, it seems that we also have some technical problems in editing. The file that we obviously record the show on seemed to cut out the last sort of 5 or so minutes. Luckily, it only did it right at the end. So I'm here very awkwardly now. It is just me. Just to say that next week the film will be Some Like It Hot from 1959 with Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe. It's one we're both very much looking forward to, and you'd have heard us say as such if the file would have played along, but sadly things just seem to be going wrong at the minute. I really wish they weren't, but sometimes these things do just happen. But ultimately, that is all we really were saying at the end of this episode. You can follow me on Twitter at the Purple Dawn with a 3 instead of the E in the, because Patrice Evra, we're not going to forget about that. Follow Nolan at NolanDean27 and follow the show at It's a Wonderful One. That is it. Again, very, very sorry not only for the delay in this episode, but also this weird technical problem that I don't really know why it has happened, but it has, and sadly it has to be dealt with, and this is the sort of only way I could possibly think of doing this, or sorting it out. But yeah, all those plugs taken care of. Until next week, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of It's a Wonderful One, even though it was late and a bit weird in terms of technical. I just don't think it can be helped when certain technical problems arise, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless, and until next week for Some Like It Hot, goodbye.